Welcome to Mindful AI, the podcast where we explore how to create AI that is beneficial to humanity, ethical, and promotes human values and flourishing. Who is in the room when AI gets built? Most organizations aren't asking. Our guest today has spent her career making sure they have to. Luli Adeyemo is Britain's 1986 BMX World Champion turned technology leader, Executive Director of TechDiversity Foundation, and architect of Australia's first diverse AI governance practitioners program. In today's episode, we dig into influence gaps, governance standards no one's reading, and what gets missed when the same few voices design AI for everyone. Let's get into it. If you find this episode insightful, please subscribe to Mindful AI and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring more of these important and meaningful conversations to you and others.
Hello and welcome to the Mindful AI podcast, where we advocate for human values in AI. Today, we are over the moon to have Luli Adeyemo here with us as our speaker today. So Luli is an award-winning technology leader, event producer, and diversity advocate with over 25 years of experience shaping the technology sector in Australia and internationally. She's the Executive Director of TechDiversity Foundation, co-founder and CMO of GovTech platform Tendertrace, and founder of Best Case Scenario, a Sydney-based marketing and events agency working across government, digital, health, and emerging technology. Her story of breaking barriers started as Britain's 1986 BMX World Champion, a teenager Black girl in a white dominant sport who became a world-class athlete against all odds. That experience of excellence amid exclusion shapes everything she does today. From expanding Gartner's Asia Pacific Conference business by 250% to championing DEI as a strategic driver, not just a values statement, Luli brings lived experience, commercial rigor, and an energy that is hard to forget. She's spoken at SXSW Sydney, the F1 Australian Grand Prix Executive Breakfast, and Women in Tech Fest, and her work has been featured in Forbes and BBC News. So welcome, a warm welcome, Luli. It's really, really exciting to have you talking to us today.
Hi, Natalie. We're really pleased to be here. Very strange listening to someone talk about you, but delighted to be here.
Yeah, and I was I'm like instantly intrigued because we always, with our guests, we always ask them if there's something, unusual, some unusual hobby or interest or some unusual fact specifically connected to mindfulness. And when this BMX World Championship was mentioned, I was immediately thinking, yeah, that would take a bit of focus and mindfulness. So I was just really curious about that. Can you just share a few words about that?
I can share. I mean, it's my absolute passion that I've actually just taken up again recently. So yes, there was a time in the 80s where I was the fastest woman on a BMX bike. Another fun fact, I'm actually the first female to win a world championship of color, the first female of color to win a world championship on a bike across any discipline. So there's a book, Black Champions of Sport, and you'll see me in there. But yeah, Martin, to your point, I mean, BMX is a sprint. The reason why I was so successful is because I was very quick out of the gate. Part of that was genetics, but definitely the ability to be calm in the moment and focus. It's a split-second difference between a win and a loss. So I think that's something that served me well in the 80s and is served me well again now.
Yeah, cool, very cool,
brilliant. And segue to that maybe would be, I think I'd like to touch briefly on how I met Luli, right, at the first time. So I think it was 2023. I was invited to the TechDiversity Awards. Haven't heard really back then, to be honest. And there you go. I went to the gala dinner at the Grand Hyatt here in Melbourne, and we had, couple of hundred people or more joining before we got started. And then I see this lady coming and with her very powerful voice, calling everyone. No bell, nothing to ring, nothing to bring attention, just her voice bringing the attention of 200 plus 300 plus people in the the waiting room outside the main space that we were moving into for the gala dinner. And that was Luli. So that was my introduction to Luli. Yes, very memorable, scene. Luli, I don't know if you recall that.
I hope you enjoyed the rest of the night as well, Natalie. We're inspired by the award winners and the stories that they shared as well. I think I think you said in my introduction, my passion for diversity, equity, inclusion, really born from lived experience, work, growing up professionally in the technology world and recognizing the lack of diversity in our tech workforce and the impact that has on what's designed and what's brought to market and what's consumed. So the awards are really a way from the people side of things to recognize the importance of having a diverse workforce and the need for diverse workforce. And I think now more than ever, I think our industry in regards to the impact and the responsibility that we have is underrated and I think misrepresented, both from a leadership point of view, from a government point of view. It's talked about, I think we're realizing it now because of AI, but we should have been realizing it a long time ago. So I've dedicated the best part of the last 20 years really trying to share the positive aspects of our industry. People just think it's the big tech companies and don't understand the role that technology plays in everything. So we talk about the tech for good, the social impact, the environmental impact, health and well-being, accessibility and inclusion. So we need people from all parts of our economy, society, part of the design. And I know I'd love to talk a bit more around that in regards to not the effects of not having that when it comes to a world of AI.
Thank you. We'll definitely explore that. And I have to say, it's really remarkable, Luli, what you put together. So that was the first year that I attended. So I was a guest, Susan Chance. She was, I think, with New 21, a little plug-in for New 21, invited me. So I was a guest in that table. And I was very impressed, especially with the keynote from, I think, Miranda Ratajski, from CIO from Westpac, which later became a guest. Yeah, became a guest speaker in another podcast that I host. And when she touched on ethical AI, etc. But you had Avanade in the room. You had so many big brands sponsoring the event. So very impressive, very remarkable effort, and I really loved the cultural infusion. Research. There was a good demonstration of who is in the room, which kind of links to a point that we discussed, I guess, in the preparation for this conversation today, that why governance need different lenses and also who is in the room when AI gets governed, which is a full circle to tech diversity and the fact that we need to get different perspectives in the tech industry, which is clearly work in progress. Yeah.
Can I just touch on that in regards to cultural infusion? So Diversity Atlas is the platform that we use. It's the most comprehensive. If you're not across it, you're not aware of it, please go look at it, look it up. So Diversity Atlas is the platform, and it's the most comprehensive tool to help organizations understand who they are beyond gender. I think we get stuck on the gender lens sometimes, which is really important, but we're far more than our gender. So the data sets that sit behind it. So you've got every world belief, religion, language, culture, sexual orientation, disability. So when individuals participate, it's a really beautiful experience to go through, especially if you're not used to being represented in a survey. Like in the census, for example, there's always a lot of feedback around the lack of representation of who people are in that type of a survey. But it gives this real richness and understanding of who you are as a workforce. And what we did with that research, so the TechReflects is our research which leverages those insights, and it's still open, anyone can participate. But what it does, it shows the difference of experience we all have based on who we are. So, when you look at and the beautiful thing is if you look at the data, like just as a male, female, it tells one story. But when you look at the intersectionality of different people from a cultural point of view, from a sexuality point of view, from a lived experience, from a long-term conditions is a really interesting one. Because if you ask people if they've got a disability, they say no. A lot of the time, but if you ask them if they've got a long-term condition, then you've got a 30% representation, which is higher than what the average is for people with disability. So the importance of language and people feeling comfortable to disclose is really important. But for us, the research has opened up a dialogue with organizations to really start to realize the impact on who you are to the experience that you have within a workforce and an organization.
Yes. So many things. And before I hand over to Martin soon, because I know that he probably have a number of questions on his mind, and a couple of things in my mind. One, the influence gap. I would like us to talk about that later. But before, one of the videos that I watched, you were talking in preparation for today, Luli, you were talking about, because you work in the digital health space, how, the importance to train models, having representative data, and the fact that with skin cancer methodology or technology, I should say, is advancing. And with AI using that space, people like myself and you, women of color, there is an impact to that, a negative impact on how models are being trained due to lack of representation. So that's just one tiny example, which links back to the need to have diversity, greater diversity in the tech industry in all levels.
And that's a really important part. And I think it's the sort of thing that makes you realize the need to keep having these sorts of conversations. So this was actually a study that was published by University of Sydney, and it was looking at the increase in AI-powered tools in clinical environments. And this was a dermatologist that was using it to identify melanomas on skin. But to your point, Natalie, it hadn't been trained on enough people of darker colored skin, so it wouldn't have picked up a melanoma on myself or you probably as well, Natalie. Martin, you'd have been fine, but it's so but the point is that the engineers wouldn't have deliberately set out to design something that wasn't fit for purpose. It's just that lack of representation. But then also the clinician didn't think, or didn't know there was a need to ask. How was this trained? Have you used enough, representational, diverse sets of data to train this on to make sure that it's fit for all of my patients, not just a few? So I think we'll come to it in a minute, the need for that governance piece, and the reason why we've designed an AI governance practitioners course is to make sure that people understand, whether you're on the business side, whether you're on the ethics side, whether you're on the legal side, you need to understand the questions that you need to be asking about these tools that are being embedded into your organizations and into your systems. Because if that had a fatal response because it hadn't picked up a melanoma, the clinician can't say it's not the engineer that's going to get sued, it's the clinician. So the clinician can't say I didn't know. That doesn't fly in a court of law. So you need to know your responsibility in the questions that you need to be asking.
And I was just thinking, you've I think that you've said so it's common, even if the clinician would detect it, that would be like trying to tack something on at the end. But I think you've rather said that diversity has to be the methodology itself. It just can't be something that you like an afterthought. So what changes with AI, like language models or machine learning models or whatever it is? What is it that change when you build it with diversity in mind from the start?
Everything. Everything. So, it's the, I mean, and it's been, a conversation we've been having for a long time now, Martin. There's a lot of work which is done around ethical AI and responsible AI, but that's all the technology bit, right? Whatever problems bias has already been baked in at that point. So then you're trying to retro fix it. So what we're saying is that, AI is still a people governed technology. So let's bring and understand the people that need to be involved in the design of AI, and take it away from thinking that it's purely a technologist responsibility. It's if you've got the right people, if you've got representation of people who the tool is being designed for, involved in the actual design, then you're going to minimize the risk. The problem is that a lot of these developments are happening in silos. And then you're given something, and by that point it's too late. Either you're finding out after there's something terrible has happened, or it's never going to go to market. So what we're seeing now, and it's still not happening enough in my view, in regards to making sure you've got the right people involved in the conversation and discussion before the design. And that message I can't emphasize enough, because we're constantly hearing of these terrible outcomes, not intentional, but because the right person wasn't there to ask the question. And I'll just finish on one more point, because Natalie, you touched on it already, in regards to the influence gap. The influence gap was something that we coined from the TechReflects research, and this is the fact that women, when we look at the intersectionality of roles within the technology workforce in Australia, no surprise to anybody that the pure tech, engineering, design type sort of roles are very male dominated. Women tend to be more in the marketing, sales, HR, customer service. So this creates an influence gap, because they're not in the room to influence the decision of what's being designed. So even though they're the people that have the most interaction, whether it's internally with the teams internally or externally with your customers, they're not being involved in the design of the solutions and the technology that's being used. So there's an influence gap there. Apply that knowledge to AI, that influence is magnified tenfold. The potential impact is magnified tenfold. So, we have to close that gap and that understanding around the questions that we all should be asking, the response we all have when it comes to AI.
And I was just one thing that just popped into my head. So one of the hopes that I have is that if we train if you can train AI on not just a subset of data, but like as much data as possible, like all the data, ideally, is that a way to reach more inclusion and diversity, or is it still that siloing and selection of data?
The question is, Martin, who's training it?
Yeah.
This is the question.
And where's the data? Where's that data coming from? I guess is always going to be
this is it. So it's not, and they're the questions that we need to keep asking, right? And understanding who's actually training it. Where's it come from? What's missing? Because there's a lot of decisions that are being made based on information which is only a subset of what they should actually be looking at. And I think it's so the understanding of the mechanisms. The people just think AI is ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. There's a understanding and knowledge around what AI is and what makes up those different layers. So I think education is key, because I think a lot of the time now we're not having the right conversation. The governance bit, which I can't talk about enough, it's in, and I was having a conversation with someone I now consider to be a friend of mine at Datacom. The governance bit, it's boring but necessary, right? This is the foundation. If we get this right, then we make sure that this technology that has the potential to go God knows where, remains a people-governed technology. So understand there's some very clear international standards, right? There's an international standard for the government's framework. There's an international standard for the AI impact assessment. People don't understand these standards enough, so this is why we've deliberately built a course which is aligned with these standards, so that organizations can get across them, make sure they've got the right people within the business. This isn't just a technology thing. You need your legal person, you need your business person, your tech person, your ethics person, all to understand, because that diversity in experience means you're going to ask a different question. You're going to see something that the other person doesn't see and doesn't think of. We've got to get rid of these silos and realize it's a holistic responsibility that we all need to know. And I say to all my friends are sick to death of me talking about it, because I said, every single one of us has a responsibility to know enough about this technology from our own personal perspective. If you are sitting with a clinician and they are using an AI powered tool, asking the question, what's it been trained on? Where's that data sitting? So that from a personal point of view, you need to understand it, but you also need to understand you have a responsibility and a voice from a professional perspective as well.
Thanks, Luli. So I'm conscious of time. You touched on that already, but I would like to do a bit of a plugging here. The TechDiversity Academy built Australia's first diverse AI governance practitioners program, designed with Dr. Colby Lanes, who contributed to the ISO IEC 42005 as Standards Australian's technical expert, deliberately cross-functional, deliberately diverse. So I get the need for multidisciplinary teams, when designing and building AI solutions. So what else would you like to talk about these governance program, Luli, if anything?
Yeah, and we're just about to launch, and thank you for the plug, because I do genuinely think it's single-handedly probably one of the most important programs that's been rolled out across Australia at the moment, because we're not having the right conversation. There's lots of AI courses and conversations at a generic level and teaching you how to use these tools, but not teaching you how to govern, the boring but practical bits. So we are actually just about to launch a scholarship for women, and we're encouraging companies to sponsor women to do the program. The reason being that already that influence gap, we know that there's only 30% of women, AI jobs at the moment are being done by women, and when you get to an exec level it's about 15 to 20%. So that influence gap is already being baked in to this particular technology, the governance of it, the practical application of it. So I think it's really important that we get women, excited. And this is a real career opportunity as well, right? It is actually, because we don't have enough. We've got these international standards, but we don't actually have enough AI governance practitioners in Australia and the world to actually do the governance bit. So we have a skills need and knowledge opportunity. So I please encourage people, take a look. It's the TechDiversity Foundation. Have a look at the governance program, and for yourself, for your family, for our society, please jump on board and have a go.
Thanks, Luli. Martin, I do have a couple of questions here, maybe to close, but I want to hand over to you first. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I'm.
So
you look locked and loaded, so go for it.
okay. So I think one thing that many organizations are experiencing, Luli, is this tension between velocity and governance, having to do it right. Regulations, you talked about, regulators and risk management, etc. And the need to, the competitors are doing, we need to do it fast, right? So velocity of change, and the fact that in many cases now AI tools are operating like black boxes. So that's another challenge that we face. And back to our prep for this conversation, your point around humans remaining deeply relevant, and having agency. So any thoughts around those themes comes to mind? Anything that you'd like to share?
No one said it was easy, right? And it is a real tussle now, because the horse is bolted. So exactly that. You've got to remain competitive, but at the same time you've got to remain safe and ethical and all those sorts of things. But at the moment, I think, there's the balance is around remaining competitive at the cost of not necessarily understanding the compliance, the governance bit. And that's the big concern. So, I know I'm repeating myself here, but you have to get across the governance piece at an executive level and throughout the organization. It's the single most important thing. And there should be, there should be, a mission-led approach to this AI for the country. Our leaders should be really talking about it in such a way that whether it's from an education point of view, from the schools, families really recognize the need to learn and understand what this thing means. And we're not getting that at the scale that is necessary at the moment. It's really concerning.
And that's actually so for someone who isn't in the room where AI decisions are being made, what would be the first move? And then also for someone who is in the room, like, what's the question they should be asking tomorrow morning? How do we get this going?
Yeah, exactly. So if for someone that's not currently in the room, I would be asking the question, how do I get in the room? And it's, if it is still all being managed, through the IT department, then I'd be going to the CIO or whoever heads up that department and asking, just like, I'm really interested in how we're using AI within our organization. I'd like to have some sort of influence and input to how it's being used. I would absolutely ask the question. And for the people that are in the room, you need to make sure that look around the room and ask the question, who's not here? Who's not in this room that should be in this room? Have we got the right representation based on what we're doing? And if not, then you need to put some process, mechanisms, commitment, intention around changing that, because your responsibility is too big to leave people out of the room.
Very good.
Thank you. Thanks, Luli. As you said before in some of the videos that we will add to the show notes, it is a question of life and death. It can be, right? If we're not doing this properly. We started the conversation going straight into regulation, ethics. We didn't talk about the human rights, because often here we talk about, AI ethics, AI regulation, human values, impact to the society, human rights, etc. You're originally from Britain, your accent, you can't escape, you can tell straight away, right? And you live in Australia for a long time now. I'm sure you're across the EU, European AI Act. I know that you're unless I'm mixing up, involved with the National AI Centre. I think we spoke about that. Maybe.
Definitely, many conversations with NAIC.
Yeah. And you're talking about the impact to the society, to the country, etc. I just wanted to step back a little bit, and maybe we can kind of close or start to wrap up on that note. That's usually how we start the podcast, but today went, the other way around. When you think of AI in terms of benefits, very, very big picture, Luli, and potential risks or concerns, what comes to mind, or benefits to society that are happening now or that you see upcoming, and concerns and risks in general? What's your view in terms of those, sides of the coin?
We're seeing huge. I've run an event agency and have a tech company, right? So the productivity benefits, we realize, every single day that it's fantastic, but we've had to put some, rules around, how it's being used, what information, are we using Claude or are we using chat? What guardrails we're putting in place to make sure that we're not leaking company information into the public sphere, right? So, we're having to start to think like that. But Natalie, my concern is the gap, the divide grows. It becomes a haves and have nots. It's I'm fortunate enough in my position and the industry that I've worked in that I can realize the benefits of this sort of technology. But if you're not, and you know, you're not from an education point of view, you're you know, in a lower social economic perspective, the divide grows. You know, it's the, I wrote a piece, I'll just close on this, I think it's a really important fact, and it was January last year, and it was the Smith family. I think they'd done a survey, and they're talking about, you know, the impact of poverty on children's education, and they were talking about the impact of poverty you know, in regards to not being able to, you know, participate in education, because, you know, not only have you not got a device, or you've only got one laptop between a household of 4 or 5 kids, you haven't got access to the internet. So, you know, so all of a sudden, you know, you can't continue the lessons that your peers in your classroom can do at home. Like you know, I came from, you know, a relatively poor household, but all I needed to, you know, to participate at school, you know, all I needed was a pen and a piece of paper, and I was as good as the person next to me. That isn't the case anymore. So, you know, if we're not looking after society on a basic level like that, how much further is that divide going to get with AI? So I know I'd like everyone to, you know, to think about that, our leaders to think about that, because, you know, we're potentially creating a bigger divide.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Luli. If you have any final wise words, but I think that's a great way to wrap up. Martin, anything that you'd like to add or ask Luli as we close?
No, I think that's a really great point. It's almost like, you know, we're sponsoring public utilities, and it's AI is going to be one of them. It's like water, electricity, and AI.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to have a very divided society moving forward. So I think that's a very, very good point. And just in general, it's been fantastically interesting conversation. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you both. Really enjoyed it. So have a great weekend.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks so much.
And Natalie,
Love
just one last point. The TechDiversity Awards are on the 31st of July. They will
Sydney,
be
right?
in Sydney this year at the Sofitel
Yes.
Wentworth. So please, I mean, it's a great, you know, with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, it's one night that you're guaranteed, you know, to be inspired by, you know, some of the positive things that are happening in our industry.
Thank you. Definitely share away. Last year, we managed to get the Mindful Cell community a table here in Melbourne. Right. So we went from, you know, guest to individual contributor to, you know, sponsoring a little table. So we'll see what we can do this year. Thank you. Love your work, Luli.
All right.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye for now.